Welcome, everyone, to the Nate Wenke Podcast, episode 3, with Pastor Solomon from Uganda. And I'm very happy to have him on today. We've known each other for quite a while, but mainly he's known my father. And he has an incredible story to talk about, and I'm really excited for that. So, Pastor Solomon, if you just kind of want to introduce yourself and what you do these days. What are you up to?
Yeah, Solomon Mwesige are my names. I'm from Uganda, Africa, right on the equator. So I'm actually feeling it chilly here because I'm used to the sun. Our weather is always between 70 and mid 80s all year round. I'm a pastor of a church called Good News Church in Uganda. Also the director of an organization called Feed the Hungry East Africa, which gives food to mainly refugees that come from the Sudan and Congo coming into Uganda. And we feed at least over 60,000 children every day. Also the CEO of KSTV, a television station in Uganda that covers 54 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. I am also a director of 2 schools, King Solomon Junior School, which goes from kindergarten to 7th grade, and then King Solomon High School that would go up to like a 12th grade here in the United States. So in brief, that's who I am and what I do.
Wow. So you have quite a few things that you do,
Yes.
in other words.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so the TV channel, you said it was MTV? Is that what you said?
KS, King Solomon Television. KS,
Television,
yeah.
Yes, okay. I
Yeah.
was a bit off there. That channel, on average, how many listeners does that have typically?
In Uganda alone, I have a minimum of 400,000 watching a day per hour. But then when you go to other countries like Kenya, Tanzania, way up to Nigeria, down South Africa, it is viewed by so many people because we are on 5 different decoders. Like, I don't know how many decoders you guys have here. Cable channels, I am on different channels where my TV can be viewed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's pretty
Yep.
cool. Where would you say the majority of your time is spent? Where do you put the most time in typically?
The majority of my time is spent in serving God because you realize that 120 years from today, none of us will be here. So it doesn't matter what we do. It doesn't matter how much we get. I would say I cover quite a lot of things, and many people would think I'm a person of influence, dealing directly with the Prime Minister and these big things. But you realize that life is here, then tomorrow you're not there. So most of my time is spent mainly at church, serving people, listening to their problems, giving them counsel, praying with them, and guiding them. So that's where I put most of my time.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You make a good point about the fact that we're not going to be here in 100 years.
Yeah.
And what we do with our time and how we choose to act in our short time that we're here is very important. And I admire you for the service attitude that you have and how you live your life, and I think that's pretty cool. So,
Thank you.
So that's a little bit about yourself today, and I'm curious, kind of more about your background, how you grew up, and then specifically how you came to know God.
I was raised on a tea farm, and my dad was a wealthy farmer who was also into management and training of the corporate people, bankers and CEOs of companies. And so many people think that Africa is all poor, which is not true. Yes, we have the poor, which we are the majority, but we also have the rich. So I came from a privileged side where my father was a wealthy guy, and we were Catholic in background. But when I went to high school, I went to, in Africa, especially Uganda, we have an opportunity that religion is allowed to be taught in schools. It is even part of our curriculum, and the lesson is called Christian Religious Education, or CRE, with even exams that are marked for you to qualify to either go to high school or university if you're taking it. But in the lower section, it's compulsory. So I went to the high school where they had a group called Scripture Union, where students sit and fellowship and read scriptures together, pray together, sing. I love music, but I had never seen a piano. So I had that music, that not just vocal, but with that piano, and I was so much attracted to that group because of the music. And when they started sharing scripture, this is something that was not really known to me, because we used to recite things, cram work, and there was no real understanding or connection with spirituality, though I was going to church. So I asked quite a few questions, and I just really liked it, and I felt the love of connecting and discovering more about my spirituality. Yeah, it is very easy to handle the intellect, which is part of you, the emotional part, which is part of you, your will. You can be stubborn or weak, which is part of you. You can discover the physical, the senses which define the physical environment that you are in. But there is another world out there, which is a spiritual world that most people don't even realize it's there. And they think everything stops on the mind part, on the feeling part, or the intellectual part, and they think everything can be defined and explained through science and all this. But there is another world out there. And most people, if maybe you find yourself in a situation where you are scared, or you feel like your life is going away, that is when some of those realities come, and you realize that what happens? What is the meaning of life? Is it just about fun and all this? So I started discovering that there is another world out there that most people don't even know. But though sometimes most of us will have that feeling of something in there which says maybe don't go, and you say something was actually saying don't go, and I went, and then I realized that something had really told me not. So there is that type of world that people must also explore, and that is the spirituality which I started discovering when I joined the Scripture Union group, and when the Bible was opened and scriptures explained. My eyes, the spiritual eyes, started opening for me to see and to analyze what I never thought was. And I accepted Christianity, or Christ, to become my Savior and Lord. And then I went back home because I was in boarding school. I don't know whether you guys use the word boarding school here, where you live in a dorm and dormitory, and you live away from home. So when time of school holiday came, or vacation, going back home, my father wanted me to pray the Catholic way. And of course, you would put your hand here and say, in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and all this, and pray. I didn't do that. I just prayed the prayer, bless the food the way I had started understanding on how to communicate to God without cramming or kind of having a formal system of approach. So I prayed, and my father didn't like it. And when I was actually closing my eyes in prayer, and I had a big slap on my cheek. Bam. And I opened my eyes, and my dad says, "What is it you think you're doing?" I said, "I'm praying." He said, "What type of prayer is that? Are you not Catholic anymore?" I said, "I'm a believer in God, but I may not say Catholic or not Catholic, but I think I feel I have a more closer relationship with God. I feel the presence of God even more than the formal way that we've been trying to do it, ceremonial, cram work, repetition. To me, it's more real." And my father said, and in Africa, fathers used to be extremely tough. The father is the law. You don't answer back. You don't reason. He orders, and all you say is, "Yes, Dad, yes," or else you're going to be punished. So with that kind of authoritarian iron hand, iron fist, my dad asked me, he said, "Are you going to keep believing that way, or you are going to do it our way?" I said, "I think I understand this even better. Yes, I was doing the other one, but I didn't know it. There was no relationship, there was no feeling, there was no understanding of what I was doing. But I think I now understand God better." And then he said, "You're going to get out of my home." And he kicked me out. My mom was married to another gentleman who was a church minister, and I had to walk 30 miles from my father's place, who had a car and everything, and he just kicked me out. I walked, and I went to live with my mom. And life was so hard because even getting food was almost a struggle. The kids were so many that were there. At my father's place, everybody was served on his own plate. But at my mother's place, they would put food on a round tray-like thing where they would just pour it, and all of you start competing. And some of us that were not used to eating at that speed because we had plenty, by the time you'd start eating, food is gone. Other kids have eaten it. That's when I totally got to understand what suffering means. One of the reasons why I have started organizations that help people, because I can tell the difference between, I knew what good life meant and what humans should really have versus what I went through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you experienced both worlds firsthand.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite the story for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when your dad kicked you out?
I was 18 years old.
18. Okay.
I was 18 years old, and then in Africa, if you are going to go to school, you must pay what we call school fees. You may call it tuition here in higher levels, but there it's school fees. And my mom was poor, and her husband was poor, so they could not afford to pay for the continuation of my education. So actually, that's where it stopped. So all I was left with was to start my life. And I realized that there was no life at my mother's place because it was total poverty and suffering. So, but I was motivated enough to spread the faith that I had now come to understand, and which I had already suffered for. I had already lost family. I had already lost my status. I had lost my future because of education. So I said, because Christianity and this deeper understanding of spirituality is not understood, so I vowed and I was determined to make sure that I preach it, to make people more know of the reality of God and the reality of the spiritual world. And I would say this is what I have done for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So from the age of 18, what was the process like for you to get more involved in the church? What was the next steps in your life, from both a growth perspective of just growing up, and then also with the church?
In those years when I got to accept Christ, there was a president in Uganda, a Muslim president by the names of Idi Amin. He had closed all churches. He had expelled every missionary. He had asked anybody that is not African, and when I say African, that is black African, to get out of the country. Americans, Europeans, Indians, anybody with a light skin had been asked to come out of the country. So when Idi Amin was kicked out of power, there was still insecurity and war in Uganda, and the stigma of any missionary or anybody that is not black coming back into Uganda. So there was no formal training. There were no Bible colleges or Bible schools or seminaries. So we started with what we knew or what we would read in the Bible. And then I started writing to Christian organizations in the United States to send me literature and material and magazines. And those were originally the source of guidance that also challenged me to even go deeper in understanding God even in a deeper way, because there are certain things that you cannot teach yourself. So iron sharpens iron. So I would say that is how I started before Uganda started opening up to more people, especially from the Western world, to have the comfort and the confidence of coming back in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you, in some ways, you couldn't have picked a worse time to be trying to be a follower of Jesus. In some ways, it was both politically, there was a oppressive force. You had no material outside of what you knew. Mm-hmm. So that was quite challenging to start. So the president, the Muslim president during that time, he got overthrown?
Yes.
What happened? Okay, so he got overthrown.
Yeah, he was a bad guy. He killed so many people. Killed many. I would say many people were killed in his regime. Then Ugandans that were in exile, that had run out of Uganda because of the bad political environment, no peace, with people in the country of Tanzania, formed an army supported by the United States and other countries and Britain. They funded that army and they kicked him out. So he went to Libya, lived in Libya for some time, and then went to Saudi Arabia where he died. Yeah.
Okay. And then who replaced him?
We had quite a few other people that replaced him. I think one guy came in and he was president for about maybe 3 months. They overthrew him. Another one came and ruled for 1 year, got overthrown. We had a lot of political and military instability even after he had gone, because there was a vacuum no system, democracy. Nobody even knew anything about democracy. And then another guy came in who had been overthrown by this bad guy, the Muslim guy. He came and took power again, and he was worse because he started revenging on the people that had kicked him out. So then we got this guy that we have right now, who took 5 men, to wage war against the government. And then he recruited, and they became 27 people with only 5 guns, and they fought, and within 5 years he had won this war, and he took over power, and he brought back peace. He opened up freedom of worship. He opened up the country. He encouraged the people that had been kicked out of the country to come back. Properties of the people that had invested and then they had been taken over, he restored all those things back. And I would say we have had the same guy for the last 34 years. And I think now people are tired of him, but he did a lot of good work to kind of bring back that country to its feet where it is right now. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's quite the history.
Yeah.
He brought back religious freedom, you said. And
yes.
Beyond the right to religious freedom, does Uganda have a set of human rights similar to the U.S.? And if they do, are they actually protected, or is that not really a concept in Uganda?
We have freedoms. We have human rights commissions, just in case your rights are abused and you can prove it. You can go to the Human Rights Commission. But definitely there's a lot of human right abuse. And of course, in places where there is corruption, somebody can pay the judge, and even if you're guilty, you can bribe the police, you can pay yourself out of trouble. So we have quite a number of people that whose rights have been abused. We put in prison wrongly. But there are systems. We also have, in Uganda, the government has put up things that would try to check some of those abuses, though still, somewhere, somehow, rights are being abused. We have the Inspector General of Government. So just in case a government official has offended or done something that he or she is supposed not to do, you can take him to the Inspector General of Government, and he will be investigated and most probably prosecuted. So there are commissions that also look into some of these things that are not supposed to be done. But humans are humans. They'll find a way of manipulating the system. But those systems are in place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there is some of that.
Yes.
However, certainly not at all to the same extent like the U.S.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. You mentioned that you feed, I think you said 60,000 children?
Yes.
Yeah, per day, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And you said that those were primarily refugees from Sudan, South Sudan, is that
and Congo.
And Congo. Okay.
Yes.
So Uganda, in some sense, has an influx of refugees. How long has that been going on?
We've had refugees for a very long time. We first had a big influx of refugees in the 60s. Refugees from Rwanda, they lived in Uganda from the 60s up to 1994, when they went back to Rwanda. And actually the president of Rwanda was raised in Uganda, educated in Uganda. He was in the army of Uganda. So they went back home, liberated their country, and went back. So some of those camps became empty. But then in the year 2000 something, there was a big war in Congo. Then refugees came, and now these refugee camps or settlements were opened again. Then now war broke out between Sudan, the Muslim Sudan in the north, and the southern Sudan Christians were fighting before South Sudan became a country. And then still more refugees came to Uganda. And even after South Sudan had become a country, the two tribal groups didn't agree. They started fighting for power. More people ran to Uganda. Uganda has, before the war in Ukraine, Uganda had more refugees than the whole of Europe put together.
Wow.
But, yes, we have like 1.56 million refugees in Uganda alone. And for me, I feed children in schools, because in the United States, you go to school, food is provided, you have a lunch. Not in Uganda. So these refugees, I realize that they don't have a home, they don't have a way of support. And again, worst still, during the days of COVID, most organizations that were helping out closed or went back to help countries where they came from, because those countries also had their own share of challenges because of COVID. So then our refugees in Uganda were left with almost nothing. So I have focused on school-going children, one, to encourage children to go to school. Yes, you are a refugee, but you can go to school knowing that you'll get a meal, which motivates kids to go to school. So, and then they also need counseling, because they have seen trauma. They have seen their parents killed. They have jumped over dead bodies as they run, or maybe they have been separated with their parents. One ran going east, the child, 4 years, 6, ran going west because of war. There was no time to prepare. So you find all these types of people that need help. So this is where even the church and our ministry, the religious part, comes in to help counsel, to help guide, to help bring hope into these people. And actually, you realize that many people are better off. They have hope, they are more settled, asking less questions, but also receiving some of the food that we give every day. And we serve cooked food. I think you visited one of those places when you were in Uganda.
Yes, and that was several years ago, but I do remember quite distinctly. I actually got to play soccer with some of the kids, which was a lot of fun.
Yes.
But I mean, the kids are just crammed into these classrooms.
Yes.
With, just not enough room. So I remember some of them were using pieces of paper to hold the food on, because they didn't even have bowls.
Yes.
To just even have food in.
And these are school books where they were writing their notes. Yeah. So they would choose to lose their schoolwork so that they can have food on that piece of paper. So at least you've been there to see exactly what we do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it certainly is when you actually go see it for yourself, it definitely changes your perspective and makes you realize how much you have to be grateful for. Mm-hmm. And that was a very good experience in terms of perspective shifting. So how did you get initially involved in feeding the refugees, and what organization is that specifically?
I started feeding refugees when I actually didn't begin with refugees. I began with my own school, King Solomon Junior School. I remember one day, kids had packed their lunch because we were providing no food. We didn't have food as a school to give to the people. So one kid had packed his lunch and he was sitting on a corner, eating. So 2 kids came and tried to show their presence, that they are also here trying to beg. So they danced, they did tricks to get the attention of the other kid that was eating. So the kid that was eating focused on his food, was not bothered by whatever others were doing, ate and finished. Looking at that, I was really moved, and I said, if this was my child begging for food and there is nothing to eat, how would I have handled this? So from that day, I had visited one place in Ironwood, Michigan, and I was showing a video of children in my school going without food. So the pastor there picked a phone and called an organization called Feed the Hungry and asked them to give me food. And I had traveled to Philadelphia when I got a call, and they were asking me if I could receive a semi or container, 40-foot container of food. I said, yes, but I've never done it. I don't know how that works. I don't know how you go through customs. I don't know. But I said, I will definitely do it. So they sent me 1 container of food, specifically to feed my children at school. But then I visited another school of my friend, and I found kids that didn't have food, and they were actually picking from a garbage, something where they had dumped stuff, and they were scavenging, looking for something to eat. And I went back and got some of the food that had been given to us, and we had signed a contract that it's supposed to be given to my children only, but I could not take it, seeing those kids picking what they were picking. So I gave away some of the food, and then I wrote to this organization and I said, I'm reporting myself, please don't put me off the support, but I've given away some little food to these people. I couldn't stop myself from doing that. Yeah. So they didn't say anything, but one of them visited and wanted to go see that other place. They saw what I talked about, and they said, I think we have found the right person who can give outside his organization, because most people will receive and they will keep within the organization and not give away. Like now the Bridge Church will receive and give to me, who is outside the Bridge, outside the United States. So they said, this is very good. So they sent me another container. So I started receiving 2, and they started giving 1 to other people and 1 to my children. That's when refugees came. I saw it on television, refugees coming with nothing to eat. I went in, and then I took on that responsibility of starting to feed refugees, starting with those from Congo. Then war broke out in South Sudan, and they came in. So I started now going to another refugee camp, so started feeding those, and I've been doing that for many years now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy how one experience like that, where you see another child,
Mm-hmm.
Begging for food with nothing, can really change your trajectory in life. And now you're literally feeding 60,000 children per day.
Yes.
That otherwise would have no food at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I also say this, that before I started taking food to one of those first refugee camps, the biggest furniture you'd see in that camp were baby coffins, because they were dying of starvation. And then you'd see other major organizations that are very popular, known, building swings for children to play, building what they call child-friendly places where kids can go hang out. And then I say, wait a minute, where will these kids get the energy to go swing when they are starving and yawning and they can't move, and you see baby coffins? So I embarked on providing clean water, drilling wells, and feeding. And I've been doing this for many years now. Yes.
Yeah, that's incredible. One thing that's happened in recent years that has rocked the world is COVID. And I wanted to ask you, both how your church and your organizations handled it, and then more broadly speaking, what was COVID like in Uganda? Because one reason I wanted to ask you this too is in the United States I think we underestimate the extent to which other countries were affected, and kind of forget about the fact that this was a global phenomenon, and that we may have suffered, but other countries certainly suffered significantly more. So if you can talk about that a little bit, I think that would be very useful.
Yeah, I think our countries overreacted and overfeared because COVID started in China, then hit them real bad, and we watched the news. Then it went to Europe, Sweden, those countries were hit, Italy, hit so bad. And then the United States, you'd see numbers coming up, and then you see people reported dead. So when the first COVID case was mentioned in Uganda, all of us knew we were in trouble. And we didn't know if we're going to survive because our healthcare system is poor. No technology, no big hospitals, no equipment, ventilators, and all these things that So then our president put us in lockdown. That is total lockdown. No movement, no nothing. Churches closed, schools closed, transportation closed, everything closed, except media houses. So I got an opportunity because I own a TV station. So the government called me an essential worker and gave me a sticker that I would put on my car for the police or the army that were deployed everywhere to give me a pass. And then later on, we were allowed to also generate more stickers to give to our workers and our people. So many of my church members and some of my people, I gave them an opportunity to be on the road. But shops closed. And this lockdown went up for 2 years, 2 good years. Businesses totally collapsed because if you had some, let's say, working capital of, let's say, $10,000, then you eat it. You have a family. In 2 years, you have nothing. You have eaten it, you have finished it, and then you're starving. So we have a lot of people that have become very poor. People that were providing are now begging and asking for help because they are not able to take care of themselves. Young girls, 15, 16, 17, 2 years at home, sometimes hungry. Many of them got pregnant because in the United States, people got paychecks for people to go buy something. For us, you are not even allowed to move, and the government is providing nothing. So the temptation of people getting pregnant or, selling their bodies in exchange for food, for survival. So we have so many unwanted pregnancies that, and babies, baby mothers, unwanted babies. Poverty that came in, businesses that collapsed because it was 2 years. And 2 years, 2 years, nothing for 2 years. So ours, I think, was the longest and the worst in the world.
And of course, you touched on the fact that a lot of the kids that you feed would get their food at school.
Yes.
So if school is closed along with most of the supply chain, they went without food.
No, what we did, my organization kept serving food. I actually served more food during lockdown than ever before. I fed millions of people. We would package food and go house to house. The government of Uganda gave me security soldiers that would go with me and my team, from village to village, house to house. So we served and served and served again and again. And then at church in our compound, we'd pack food and put it in lines where people would come and pick. They would come and pick and then go home. So we would go to mainly homes, because people are not allowed to move, except for those that are coming to our church. They would be allowed to come pick food, and then go back home. So we served more food than ever before.
Wow.
Yes.
And I think you had mentioned this to me, but you served more food and were a bigger help to the people than even the government. Is that
Yes. True? Yes, we did. We gave more food than the government, especially in one of the districts where we are. That is the district of Wakiso. But we went to even other districts of Uganda where we gave out food, house to house. Thousands and thousands and thousands of homes given, and millions of people fed.
Yeah, and when you say total lockdown, you mean that if you were even caught outside of your house, you would be jailed. Is that correct?
People went to jail. Many people went to jail. And they call that breaking the presidential directive. It was a decree. Don't move, and that's it. You move, and you're caught, you go to jail.
How is Uganda doing now? I assume all of the restrictions are gone. Is that correct?
Yes, all restrictions are gone. Everything has come back to normal. But there are many people who did not come back up because they lost everything. They lost their businesses. Others who had taken loans, bank loans, their property got taken because the banks did not excuse anybody, saying it's locked down, you're not working, so there's no way you're going to pay your loan. So people lost their homes, people lost their lands, people lost their businesses. People are starting and struggling to come up again, and we believe we'll stabilize. But there are many people that may never come back, and we had a lot of people that committed suicide because they couldn't watch their children die of starvation. They could not accept what was going on, and they didn't know what else to do because it became too long, and there was no hope as to when that would come to an end. So many people ended their lives. Wow. But things are back to normal now.
Okay. Yeah, and certainly people that had businesses, to survive 2 years with no income is nearly impossible. So that probably set a lot of them back significantly.
And not only that, you are selling certain things that have an expiry date. By the time you open the shop, things have expired already. Yeah. Yes, you have the product, but you can't sell it to anybody. So many were knocked out. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit more about what you do today. Now, you're the lead pastor of your church. And what's the name of your church again?
Good News Church.
Good News Church. And how many people do you typically have that come to your church?
We have a membership of over 4,000 members in our church. and our services run almost every day. And on Sunday we have two big services, but we have many other services that we do every day. I would say every day we have two services. We have a service at lunchtime. There's some people that choose to come to church, to have some, spiritual nourishment, worship, prayer, and then they go back to office. And then we have those that will come from office in the evening and want to go through church. So services are open, 2 services a day. And then on Sunday we have 2 services.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was what percentage of the people that come to church are young people, are below 25? Is it a significant percentage? Do you have a lot of young people in the church, or is it a smaller amount?
Uganda has always been the youngest country on average population in the world. A few years ago, I think the average age in Uganda was 14 and a half, which must have raised to now about 18 years, the average age in Uganda. So in our church, the majority are young people. I would say 65%.
Yeah, so it's the majority. And what's so interesting about that is that in the U.S., that is the opposite. Most young people are not involved in a religious community. They don't go to church. It's primarily the older generation that goes to church. And one thing I want to ask you in regards to that was a lot of young people today, in the U.S. specifically, feel disconnected from their spiritual side. And you described how you got connected with your spiritual side, and what that meant to you and how that changed your perspective about the world. If you were to speak to young people in the U.S. today and say, this is why you should try to reconnect with your spiritual side and join a religious community, why that's important, why is that so important?
There are so many things that you cannot handle on your own. I'll give an example. There are issues related to behavior, addictive behavior, challenges, suicidal thoughts that may come and you don't have solutions. There are so many things that are beyond any human control that only God can solve. And there is that gap that you not feel by science, questions that cannot be answered by technology, questions that cannot be answered by in any other way. And once you close that, then you'll find, and this is why I'll tell you, you find more crime in the United States than you'll find in Africa. You'll find more suicide here, where you have everything. Why should somebody really who has all the food you want, you wake up, the fridge is full, you have a car, you reach 18 and you have the excitement of now getting a driver's license and driving and having fun. There are programs that can take care of you to make you happy, but still you find suicides, then you find behaviors that people are struggling with, and nobody can tell anybody, but deep in their hearts they're asking themselves, why me? How can I handle this? And it's only God that can handle that. And the earlier people realize that there is the spiritual world where certain questions of life can be answered, the better. And I would request that the younger generation here give it a try. Don't close it out and look at it as old-fashioned. No, it's a reality. It's a life that is out there. Ignoring it doesn't mean it's not there, or it doesn't mean that we are not battling with things that we don't know how to handle. People have anger issues that they don't know, their behavior issues, challenges, rebellions in homes, anger against parents, against gunshots. You find in school, one young kid comes and you say, why should you do all that? It's because there is a gap that has not been filled, and only God can fill that gap. You can read every book that there is. There are certain solutions that can only come from the spiritual source. And this is why church is very important. And I would say not every church. There are churches where there is life, where you go and the gospel is brought in a way that it brings answers to many questions of life. And God is a relationship. He's for real. But, you can't know, anything you know is either out of research, you study, you research, you try to find. But if you close your mind towards something and you lock yourself in, then you deny yourself to even know the existence of what is there. So I would request or challenge the young generation here to open up to the spiritual, because it's there. And this is why some people here, they will even do it in the wrong way. They will do tarot cards, they will do the Ouija boards, they will try all these other things the wrong way, which may not bring the answers they want. I would think going to church and finding the right spiritual direction would help a lot in answering a lot of the life questions that science may not answer.
No, it's a very good word. You touched on the fact that at a core level, we are all spiritual beings. There's that side to us that even if we ignore it, that doesn't mean that it goes away.
Exactly.
And that's something that I've discovered myself, that we all have these questions. We all have religious questions. We all have spiritual questions. And just because we ignore them doesn't mean that they don't trouble us deeply. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I think is definitely true today is that we have a crisis of meaning in specifically the Western world, in the U.S. And you touched on that with higher crime rates and suicide. Mm-hmm. And we can have all of this material prosperity, as much food as we want, technology, economic prosperity, and yet there's still a hole. There's still something missing.
Exactly.
And one thing that I came to realize several years ago is that, in my opinion, it takes more faith to be an atheist, to believe that there isn't a spiritual realm, mm-hmm. to believe that there is no concept of God, to believe mm-hmm. that all of that was just nonsense. It takes more faith to go down that road than to believe in a God or to believe in a higher power.
Exactly.
And that has been very transformative to me, to recognize that we all have to have faith at one point. No one escapes that reality of the unknown and things that you have to grapple with. Mm-hmm. And you talking about how I think a lot of young people have just abandoned or just not even tried to explore the spiritual side. And you talking about how just even trying, just even putting your foot in the door and seeing what comes of that, mm-hmm. and seeing if that can help answer some of the questions they have, I think is very important. So
exactly.
Yeah. You also described forming a relationship with God, and that's a very tricky concept for a lot of people I know today. it's almost it's a foreign concept is one way to put it. And one way that I've described that for myself is a relationship, or to get to know what is true. And I think a primary aspect of God is truth. And that's one way that I've put it in more pragmatic and practical terms for myself, to focus on what is true, morally true, and what is just. What is one way that you would describe your relationship with God? What does that mean to you?
You see, God is real, and his reality comes as a result of us following basic instructions that he has given us, through which he can manifest himself to us. For example, prayer, where you speak to God. You pour out your heart and you express whether it is needs or challenges or issues related with you in any way. And then you see answers. I've been sharing with you, and your family knows exactly, even at church, where at the bridge I've shared a few things on how you would not describe how this could have happened unless it was God himself.
Yeah.
For those that are watching me, I'll give a simple example here. When we wanted to do the work that we are doing, to reach out and help people at a level when we were helpless ourselves, but we had the heart of what we wanted to do, we read it in the Bible that if we ask, God will answer. And then we put that to a test. Went on our knees and prayed and said, Lord, can you open doors for us? Give resources to us that we are able to do something and help out. How did God answer? I was in Uganda. One rock star by the names of Bono. I've never met him. He doesn't know me. I don't know him. He went to Congo, another country, and he saw the suffering of people. Then he came and did a TV show in Chicago. And he said, pastors in the US, please, you need to do some work in Africa. Help reduce the suffering of the people in Africa, the new building, good buildings, church buildings, when people are dying. One pastor, whom I don't even know, here in Kalamazoo, watched the show, ordered for that clip from that TV station. He bought it and he played it for other pastors in Kalamazoo. So the pastors said, we need to go to Africa. Africa is over 1 billion people.
Yeah.
Over 1 billion people. But I and my team were praying for resources. And these pastors, I had never been to Kalamazoo. Among the people they chose, I would call it a miracle. I was chosen. And this is the truth, because you know your dad and you know the story. You're interviewing me, Nate, you know exactly. So a team of people called me, coming to see me in Uganda. I'm the one who prayed, and then God is touching people through Bono, and then finally a team of people is coming from the United States. And then they come and find me in Uganda. And then they start supporting me. Most of the things you hear I'm doing has all come from the United States, simply because I prayed. And some of these people that are helping me, I did not even ask them. I did not know them. But because I know that God told us to ask, he says, pray. And then I started learning how do they pray, because all that is described on the how-tos. So then I do it according to how it is explained in my relationship with God, and then you start seeing God answering and doing all these types of things. I can go on and on and on and on. So the relationship with God is so real. And the peace that also comes when you know that you're not alone, but God is with you, is also refreshing. So I would think the discovery of spirituality, but also in the right way, because you can try to look for spirituality in a wrong way, but finding the right church that teaches the Word of God and guides people through discipleship on how it is done, and then you learn how to do it, or they guide you on how to do it, and then you see how it works, and then you see the peace that it brings. You will like it, and you'll thank me later. Yes.
Good word. Yeah, the story of how you got connected is truly incredible, and I've heard the longer version, and there's even more to it than just that. But it is there's not many times that I feel like the use of the word miracle is correct, but this certainly would be one of them. So that's pretty incredible. So I wanted to ask you one final question, which is what's one of the newer things that you're working on right now, and where are you focusing most of your time and attention today?
We are working on the expansion of the building of the high school, because when we started the high school, 2 months into the opening of the new school, we got a lockdown.
Yep.
Brand new students, brand new school, then back home for 2 years. So last year, we started again the school with a population of 350 students. Brand new school, 350 students. We finished the first year. Then we realized that there were quite a number of things that we needed to do. Number one is expansion of our facilities for kids not to be as congested like you saw them at the refugee camp, or because we have 95% of the students there are all living on campus in boarding school, and we needed to build more facilities. So that has been a major project that we are doing as we prepare for the school year to begin on the 4th of February. So that is an ongoing project of expansion, so that we can give more students an opportunity to come to a good school on a good foundation, and academically competing with the best of the best in the country. So majorly that is our major area of focus.
Cool. If people want to support you, what is the best way to do that?
They can do it in 2 ways. One, they can donate through the bridge, because the bridge, and I think that would be the best way.
Yep.
The Bridge Church here in Portage would be the best way. And maybe those that are far away that cannot come to the bridge in one way or another, they can visit my website and do a PayPal. You can use PayPal. And my website is www.goodnewsug, the short form of Uganda, goodnewsug.com. www.goodnewsug, one word, goodnewsug.com. So you'll go on the giving part, where you'll find the PayPal and then you can still make your donations there.
Excellent. I can put both those links to both the bridge and your website in the description for this too, just to make it a little bit easier.
Yes. And if they're doing it on the bridge, they also, if it's a check on the memo, put there Pastor Solomon, or put there Uganda, so that the checks that are coming to the church, they can know that this is specifically designated for the work in Uganda.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. I know you pretty well, but I've gotten to know you even better through this, and it is truly incredible what you are doing, and truly you are doing God's work and helping those who need it most. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time, and that is all. So thank you, Pastor Solomon.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm very happy being here, and thank you.